suffered an epidural hematoma and 6 skull fractures after he fell off his BMX bike because he wasn't wearing a helmet. He hit his head on the bike and it came 1/8 of an inch from puncturing his brain. Advent Health for Children's Dr. James Baumgartner performed surgery that involved placing 4 titanium plates. Now, understanding just how lucky he was, Killian wants to raise awareness about the importance of wearing your helmet, and we'll talk to him in this very special episode of our show. Hello, and welcome to Healthy Connections. I'm Annetta Wilson, your host. Healthy Connections is a show dedicated to exploring a wide variety of topics, from prenatal care to Alzheimer's disease. And we do so with a wide variety of perspectives, from the professionals that help treat the syndromes to everyday people like you and me who may have personal experience dealing with these topics on a first-hand basis. Stay tuned for Healthy Connections. To start our discussion, we're joined by Killian and his dad, Josh. Killian experienced a serious accident while riding his bike not too long ago, so we're going to talk about the lessons he and his family have learned from this experience and his special message to you. Killian, we're so glad to see you.
Thank you.
That was a pretty nasty spill that you took.
Yeah.
Tell me about that day. What happened?
So it was just a regular Saturday afternoon, and me, my dad, and my friend Colton decided to go on a short bike ride in our neighborhood. And we just, we were around the corner, not even 5 minutes away from our house, and I looked back, to see if my friend was okay, because, he's a little younger than me, and I kind of lost control, and I hit the side of the sidewalk, and I flipped, and then the bike came up, and the pegs, they're almost like metal poles, came up and impaled me on the side of the head.
Do you remember all of that?
Yes, I do.
Oh my goodness, that must have been so scary for you.
Yeah, it was.
Dad, you watched all of this happen. Take us through that heart-stopping moment for you.
So it was just a normal bike ride Saturday afternoon, and him and his buddy were on the sidewalk. I was on the street riding next to him, and the sidewalk took a turn, and then, like he said, he lost control, the bike flipped, and I got off my bike, walked over to him, the bike was still laying on top of him, so I pulled the bike off and thought it was just like another one of the 1,000 wipeouts that he's had growing up on a bike. And but I noticed he wasn't crying, he wasn't saying anything, he was just very quiet, and his legs were still kind of making the biking motion in the air.
Right.
And I put my hand on the left side of his head just to kind of calm him and see what was going on, and that's when I saw all the blood and pulled his hair back and saw that there was a very large laceration on the side in the shape of the peg on the back, a half moon, and his eyes were not able to focus, and I knew something was wrong. It was, I assumed it was a concussion of some sort, and had to decide very quickly whether to call an ambulance or to take him to the hospital myself, and just decided that I was going to take him up to the emergency room and see what was going on.
Yeah. Did it hurt?
Yes. But at the moment, it didn't really, because, I was in shock and I didn't really know what was going on, so I couldn't really feel it. But after, driving to the hospital, I kind of felt it, and yeah, it kind of was painful.
And then what was your next memory? Because you had a pretty serious surgery. What was your next memory when you woke up in the hospital?
So when I woke up in the hospital, I was kind of confused, out of it because of the anesthesia. And then I saw my parents, and everything kind of popped back into my head, and I was like, and I said hi to them, and then I was like,
That was probably the best hello they have ever heard in their lives.
Yeah.
So what would you say to kids your age, because you're the ripe old age of 10, who go, I don't want to wear a helmet, they're dorky, I don't want to. What would you say?
I would say wear the helmet even though you don't think it's cool, because if you don't think it's cool, doesn't mean it's not important. I think it's cool because, you know, it can save your life. Even like if I was wearing a helmet, then none of this would have happened. So I just think to myself, wear your helmets even though you don't think it's cool.
So why weren't we wearing a helmet that day?
Because, you know, I used to wear a helmet when I was a little kid. I used to wear pads. But as I've gotten older, I've grown out of the habit and just thought I was okay, you know. Because you wouldn't expect to have this serious injury on a small bike ride.
Right. But that's when they happen.
Yeah.
So what's it like for you now? You're a few months past that, your surgery. What are doctor visits like? Are things different for you? And if they are, how?
You know, they're kind of different because when I first went back into school after my injury, I, you know, couldn't do recess, I couldn't do PE, and I also couldn't do soccer because I was playing soccer. But now I'm, you know, this is my first season getting back into soccer and, you know, playing, and I'm in recess now and I'm in PE, and yeah.
I'm so happy that you're recovering so well.
Thank you.
What do you say to other parents? Because some would say, well, they don't want to wear the helmet. It'll be okay.
I mean, like he said, when he was younger and he was learning how to ride, we enforced it, and we were very, you know, strict about that. And as he was more comfortable on the bike and he was riding more, we kind of succumbed to the, oh, Dad, I don't need to wear a helmet, or, you know, it's not a big deal. And the thought process is, you know, if he and I are doing a 3-mile bike ride down to the soccer fields, then that's a given. But the thought process is if you're only going down the street and it's a casual bike ride, it's not a big deal. And, you know, it is. And, you know, similar to car accidents, you know, the majority of them take place closer to your home. And that concept applies to bike rides as well. You could be in your driveway and have a spill and need the helmet on. So,
are you riding your bike again yet?
No, because, you know, I kind of just want to get a little more settled, and my parents were going to take me, you know, to get a fitted helmet. And, you know, we had the thought, we didn't know for sure, but we had the thought right after my accident happened to design a helmet that is hard, but it's cool, and, you know, we want to make it like so kids my age want to wear it.
Well, if anybody can do it, I'm betting on you. So happy to see you, Killian, and we're glad you're doing well.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dad, for being so supportive. And we will be back right after this. Advent Health for Children's Dr. James Baumgartner is here to discuss his role in Killian's complete recovery after a very serious bike accident. Thanks for being with us, Dr. Baumgartner.
Thanks for having me.
First of all, let's start with the basics. What is an epidural hematoma?
Okay, so you have your scalp, and then under your scalp is your skull. And under your skull is something called the dura, and it's a heavy membrane that surrounds the entire brain and spinal cord and protects it. And an epidural hematoma is when you have bleeding between the skull and the dura.
And what kind of problems can that alone cause?
Well, if the bleeding continues to a point that it gets large enough to really press on the brain tissue, it can kill you.
That's pretty serious.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what you walked in on. When you got the call and you got there and Killian was there, set that scenario up for us and what you had to do.
So when he came to the hospital, he had a laceration on the right side of his scalp, and you could see through that laceration the bone.
You could see through to his skull.
Yes, we could.
Oh, wow.
And so under those circumstances, he'd already had a CAT scan in the emergency room, and you could see that it was a depressed skull fracture with epidural bleeding around it.
So what is the most critical thing to do at that point when you see something that serious? What's the first thing you as a surgeon want to do?
Well, I want to get the blood out. I want to get the bone back where it belongs. And then the complicating thing for his case was that the bike part had cut his scalp open, so that increases the risk of infection. So you want to get all that stuff done, and you want to get it done quickly so that you minimize the risk of an infection on top of everything else.
Now, you do this kind of surgery all the time, I suspect more often than you'd like to. What are some of the worst cases that you've seen?
Well, he was very fortunate in that his dura was tough enough not to break or tear, and so his brain underneath the fracture was protected. If you had a little bit more severe fracture and the dura was torn and the bone fragments were driven into his brain, that's a much more serious situation, much more difficult to treat, and he'd be much less likely to recover as well as he did. But in the worst case scenarios, those fractures, if you can't control the bleeding or you get an infection that gets away from you, you can die from a head injury from a bicycle fall.
You're a cyclist.
Yep.
Have you fallen? Have you had spills?
Absolutely.
So what do you tell people about helmet safety?
Well, if you talk to people who cycle, what they tell you is it's not a question of if you're going to have a wreck, it's a question of when you're going to have a wreck. And if you have a helmet on, it's going to be a lot better situation than if you don't have a helmet on.
So what do you say to people who go, I don't want to wear this thing, or I'll put it on but I won't close it up, or I'll only wear it because mom and dad make me? How do you get past that kind of wall?
Well, I mean, in Killian's case, it was pretty easy. After he'd gotten over and recovered from surgery, I said to him, you know, if you had been wearing your helmet, the bike would have hit your helmet, you would have dusted yourself off, picked your bike up, and kept right on riding. You wouldn't have had to come to the hospital, you wouldn't have had to have surgery, you wouldn't have to have IVs and blood draws and all this other silly stuff if you just wore your helmet. So the basic deal is if you're on two-wheeled devices, bicycles, scooters, whatever, you're going to wreck. And if you're prepared for the wreck, it's a good situation. And if you're unprepared for the wreck, it can be really catastrophic.
So let's go back to Killian for a second. You had to put titanium plates in his head.
Yeah, so he didn't, it wasn't a clean break. He sort of shattered his skull, well, his bicycle. He had a BMX bike, and they have those posts on the axle. Mm-hmm. And I think what happened was when he hit the ground, the post made its way around and hit the side of his head and drove the bone in. You can't just, lay it in there and hope for the best. You have to sort of reconstruct the contour of the skull. And the skull's not flat, it's curved. And so there are craniofacial plates that are tiny little titanium plates with tiny little titanium screws, and what you can do is hold the bone in the right location so that it can heal, and those titanium plates do that.
Does that take a long time, that kind of injury? When you're talking about bones basically refusing, is that the...
Yeah, it's like any bone break. It takes about 3 months to really completely heal in.
And what about the long-term repercussions for children who have these kinds of accidents? Because they're going to be, hopefully adults a lot longer than there are children.
So most of the time those plates the titanium is a very unreactive metal, so usually your body doesn't react to it. And usually they just lay there and don't cause any trouble. Sometimes, unfortunately, the screws can back out from the bone and become points of tenderness and irritation, and sometimes we have to go back and fish fish the plates out after they're all healed up.
So how often will you have to monitor Killian moving forward?
I'm going to see him once a year for a few years, and then he should be free and clear. And I've talked to the family about what that screw situation looks like, feels like, and if that pops up, they can come back and see me.
So last word to people who are still on the fence about wearing helmets.
You know, it's really not that big of an inconvenience, and it's a great protection. When I first got to Orlando, I was riding home one night, and I got on Mills in the bike lane, and there were two 2x4s that had managed to get into the bike lane, and there were cars on in the road. So I hit the 2x4s and managed to stay upright, and then crashed into the grass on the side, and I hit my head and scraped up my helmet, and my bike was pretty wrecked. But I got up and walked away. And so I think, you know, it can happen to you at any moment and under any circumstances. And if you're prepared for it, you're okay. The other thing I'd say to kids is, it's kind of a fashion statement if you let it be a fashion statement. And if you wear your helmet clipped, don't wear your helmet not clipped, there's no point. You can turn the tide in terms of getting other kids to wear their helmets. And same thing with skateboarders. There's skateboarding communities where people are all helmeted up, and there's skateboarding communities where people don't think it's cool. And those are the kids that end up in the hospital and get surgery, and the ones that are wearing the helmets don't. And so I think, you know, the other thing I wanted to say was, I see a lot of kids on electric scooters with the helmet on and the straps hanging down.
Kind of defeats the whole point.
It's just a waste of time. If you're going to put it on, clip it, because it doesn't help you. And I can tell you, you ride long enough, you're going to have an accident. It's just the way it is.
And that's from a pediatric neurosurgeon who is a cyclist. So I think that's the perfect last word, Dr. Baumgartner. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will be back right after this. Stay tuned. What is that saying, out of the mouth of babes? We've heard an important message from young Killian today about wearing your bike helmet. When it comes to bike safety, hope is not a strategy. So be safe out there so you can continue to make more healthy connections.